All right, here we are in my outdoor studio. I have my little printmaking station set up. Here I have the mixing chemicals that I will be using, and you will use those like 1-to-1 in your emulsion liquid. And then these are some of the other things that are kind of helpful if you're doing the wet method. So we've got vinegar, water, some smoked paprika, turmeric, salt, and then this is a lot of the clippings of the natural items that I use, and this is all from my garden space. And then over here we also have some soapy sudsy water and binding clips that will be useful for putting it all together. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of walk you through the process of my fun with cyanotypes. Okay, first you gotta load up your brush, get your emulsion going, kind of try to apply like a nice layer all the way across the paper. I usually make sure I go both directions as I'm going in and over the paper, horizontal, and then kind of backing it with the opposite vertical directions. Okay, and so it's really good to have like sort of a plan of what you're doing when you're doing the wet, because you do want to get the materials onto the paper fairly quickly. I mean, but the nice thing about this process is that you actually have a good amount of time for doing your compositions, because it takes a while for it to dry. So anyway, I'm gonna do sort of what I chose was like to do like a floral versus like an herbal type of composition. So this is just a collection of herbs from my garden. Okay, so I've got some sage and lavender. I'm going to be sort of mixing in to different compositions, trying to get okay, so sometimes I'll like spray some of my things with some vinegar because that kind of disrupts the emulsion that is happening here. So that kind of is some really interesting chemical reactions. Let's see, at this point, I'm gonna skim a little bubbles. So bubbles also can be really interesting because they also kind of disrupt the chemical process, and you can get some really interesting effects. So I'm gonna leave some of that there. You can see it's already like having some chemical reactions. You never know how it's gonna turn out, and that's part of what I love about this process. Okay, so I'm gonna sprinkle a little turmeric to get a little bit color. And let's go up here, what comes there? Do a little bit over on this side. Okay, one thing that I've discovered makes that stick is by adding a little vinegar. Helps with the stain of it. Okay, so sprayed a little vinegar on that. Okay, that's that first layer. Here I can see a little vinegar got sprayed. I am going to do this as my little floral. This one I'm going to do is a different, more vertical composition. Okay, kind of push that down, flatten some things. Now what I like to do is go back over it a little bit with some more layers on top of that glass, just to kind of hopefully create a little bit more variety of tone. Okay, and then you just sandwich that with another piece of glass. And then you add your binding clips on all 4 sides, so you can keep the glass as close, or all the materials as close to the paper as possible. Whoops, probably don't want to do that. Okay, now it is ready for exposure. So I'm gonna take it out into the sun. Probably 20 to 25 minutes is all the exposure I need on a bright sunny day like it is today. Hey, Dexter. All righty. Okay, so now I have my prints exposed, and so I'm just going to quickly take apart all the pieces. Okay, there's 1, there's 2. All right, this is the first water bath over here. So I'm going to slip 1 in, and we're basically washing the emulsion off of the page. Anything that was exposed to the sun then becomes the cyanotype blue that adheres to the paper. And so it's always fun to watch the development process, because you never know what you're going to get, and that's part of what I like about this process. It's experimental, it's whimsical. You can use natural plant matter, you can use any sort of template, anything that blocks the light to create this. In the winter, I think about using transparencies that have negatives printed on them, so you could use that as well, and do it in indoor with a UV light. So you can do it all year round, but I find that I really, really, really kind of enjoy the outdoor process, because it is just, kind of connects me back to nature, and it's outdoors, which I love to do. And based off of where you are, you will always get different varieties of plants to play with, so that's pretty exciting as well. All right, so there we go. Gonna rinse that for about 2-3 minutes. Also transfer it to the next bucket, which is clean, clear water, for another couple minutes. All right, so my prints have been rinsing in the water for about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm now going to just put a cap full of hydrogen peroxide into the final water bath. Not gonna worry too much about that. Get that a little bit mixed up. Okay, and then, so this is the final piece. The hydrogen peroxide in this final water bath speeds up the setting process. So even though these start off as amazingly, all these variations of blue and some depth, eventually they will always darken to more of the cyanotype blue. So the hydrogen peroxide just sort of speeds up that process. So you kind of know more quickly, rather than in a couple of weeks, what the final print will look like. So you can see the difference right there, side by side. That's fresh into the hydrogen. And then you just let this sit for another minute or 2. Final rinse, final set. Okay, and so now it's time to just pull them out. You can see how much it's changed from the very beginning. I usually just hang this on the clothesline to dry until it's all dry, and then I will press them flat.